welcome to our video about security. There's a couple topics that you're really going to want to know about this one, and several concepts that are important to the aspect of keeping you, your family, and your property secure. First, we want you to understand operational security. You've heard the expression from World War II, loose lips sink ships. Big ad campaign that they had. You want to do the same thing with your preps. You don't wander around telling all your buddies at work, everybody you've ever met in your life, everything that you're doing with regards to your preparations. It's not a secret, but it's not public. You're not ashamed of it, but you're not bragging about it. Everyone who's been a prepper for any length of time at all has heard that one dreaded phrase that your friend or your family member has said, "Well, I'll just come to your house." That is not the phrase you want to hear. And if you hear that phrase, then you know at some point you kind of messed up a little bit. The concept is also known as being the gray man. Someone who doesn't stand out. You're not flashy. No one has any reason to give you specifically a second thought when it comes to, are you dangerous? Are you someone that they should turn to in a crisis? Are you someone that they should maybe think about if they're a thief? You want to be the person that comes in, goes out, nobody gives you a second thought, they see your vehicle on the road, it doesn't stand out. If they see you at church, if they see you at work, you're just another guy. That's being the gray man. Now in a crisis situation, sometimes you need to take charge. Sometimes you need to use your equipment, use your training. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about beforehand, before there's a problem, when everything is normal, when you're making your preparations, you don't stand out. You maintain good operational security. Now that doesn't mean you don't have trusted friends, other people that are preppers, and you're working together with them. But just the masses in general, the people that don't care, the people that won't listen, the people that maybe you've broached the subject of prepping with a little bit and they blow you off. Oh, that stuff's stupid. Oh, you're a fearmonger. Oh, whatever, get out of here. Okay, you don't impress upon those people the scope of what you're trying to accomplish. You just let it slide. You don't want to embed yourself in their memory so that you're the very first thing that they think of if there's a crisis or a problem. You don't want to put yourself in a situation where maybe you have to turn somebody away, or maybe you have to forcefully send someone away. That's not a good situation. So this gets us to our next topic. James Yeager calls it getting off the X. It means if there's a problem, you want to be away from that problem. If there's the potential for a problem, if there's the potential for danger or conflict, the best way to survive that is to not be there. Be somewhere else. Be away from that danger. Sometimes you can bring the danger on yourself. If you were not the gray man and you told everyone what you're doing, yeah, I've got tons of food, I got tons of firewood, and I can take care of my family for a year. Who are those people going to come to that you've told that? You have put yourself on the X. You have put yourselves in the crosshair. Not too long ago there were riots in major cities, people burning stuff down, mad at the police, angry at the world. If you were going to go camping with your family for the weekend, would you go pick that street? Would you go downtown where everyone's rioting, burning cars and smashing windows? Of course not. I'm using an example that's extreme to get the point across. If you're going to go camping and you want to be safe, you go where there's no people. You go where there's few predators, few problems. You're removing yourself from the possibility of danger to the extent possible. There's a lot of ways you can do this. You minimize your own signature to the people around you, and then you move to where you're not around a lot of people. This is called the inverse square. You'll find this referenced often by Wesley Rawls. The idea being, the fewer people there are, the fewer problems there are. You get a lot of dense people, you got a lot of potential for problems. Think of it like this. If we took a large jar of marbles and poured it out on the floor, right in the middle, you're going to have a lot more marbles. But as you get further and further and further out on the room, there'll just be a few things. So think about that when you're picking a place to live. And we're going to get into this later on our homesteading videos. But for now, think about it. Are you in a secure place? Are you in a high-rise apartment? Are you 40 miles outside of town on a farm? If there's a crisis, which one is going to be more secure? Which one is going to be right in the crosshairs? Which one allows you to be the gray man? Use a little bit of common sense. Those are our first two concepts. And now let's look into some actual hardware on security. Firearms, a very lengthy topic. We could talk about these for hours and hours. You can get into tremendous detail. This is a huge hobby. This is a sport. There's a lot that goes on with firearms. So what we're going to do today is try and give you a primer to understand what types are out there, what types can you use, what are the benefits, and what are the disadvantages of all the different types of firearms, from shotguns, hunting rifles, target rifles, all the way down to handguns. These are the topics we're going to cover today. First, we're going to talk about handguns, the firearm that you carry on your person, close by, all the time. It can live on the nightstand, it can live at your hip, it can live in your carry bag, but this is the one that it's not the most powerful, but it is the easiest to tote around. A handgun compared to a rifle, very less lethal. The majority of people that get shot with a handgun live to tell the tale. The majority of people that get shot with a rifle, no, they're done. But this is the thing that's easy to tote around. You can't really carry around your deer rifle all the time. Not really a good defense weapon anyway. So, a semi-automatic handgun. This one holds 16 rounds of 9mm, which is probably going to be your most common defensive round. You load it that quick. You empty the magazine, you're fighting off a bad guy, you grab another magazine, and it's loaded that quick. You can reload a revolver, they have speed loads, things like that, but it does take a lot more time and very careful mechanical manipulation to get that revolver reloaded. When you go to pick out a handgun, don't make these a present. Straw man purchases are illegal, and you want to make sure you get something that fits your hand. If you're getting a handgun for your partner as a family, when you take them to help them pick one out, make sure it fits their hand too. Let them pick out their own pistol, let them buy their own pistol, and that way they'll have something that's ergonomic. A lot of them anymore, the back strap here will be replaceable. You can modify it different ways so that it really, really fits well. A handgun is inherently less accurate than a rifle, so you need to make sure you give yourself every advantage so that it fits properly and is going to work as best as it can for you. There's hundreds of designs. So when you go to do this, do your research up front. You can spend a lot of money and not really get exactly what you want. But this is the weapon that you're going to carry to help you get to your rifle. This is not the one you would choose if you knew you were going to be in a gunfight. You would pick something else. But just day to day, all the time, this is the one you're going to have with you all the time. Next, I want to look at the 10-22 rifle. This is perhaps the most common rifle in the world. Maybe second place to the AK-47, depends on your sources. This is a target rifle. This is a small game animal rifle. They're very inexpensive. It shoots .22 long rifle, the most common cartridge you're ever going to find. It's inexpensive and they're really, really light. You can carry a ton of ammunition for this rifle. It's excellent for training, teaching new shooters how to operate a firearm. It's excellent for target practice, and it's excellent for small game, squirrels, rabbits, groundhogs. This one is one you just can't go wrong. It's not exactly great for self-defense or combat unless someone is just so small that they can't carry a full-sized rifle. You can get a lot of accessories, stocks, different colors, different scopes. Generally it comes with a 10-round magazine that fits inside. You can get 25-round magazines. Lots of options. But this is a go-to that you want to have in your battery of firearms just so you can practice, train, and take out small game. Don't neglect this one. It is very inexpensive to shoot, to own, everything about it. It's just one you want to have. Next, we're going to look at a very broad spectrum of rifles, the hunting rifle. This will also double as a sniper rifle. The example I'm using today is a .243 caliber bolt-action rifle. Several decades ago, and in some places still today, this was the go-to rifle for a lot of your SWAT teams. Hunting rifles are extremely accurate. They use a bolt action, so they don't fire as fast, but what you put the crosshair on is exactly where that bullet is going to go. The cartridge is extremely powerful, and it's capable of taking it down a deer or a larger animal. These come in a lot of varieties, a lot of calibers. You will see tons and tons of these out there. This is purely an offensive weapon. This is not in any way a defensive weapon. Now, in terms of the prepper, your .22, that's more of a practical rifle. We've already talked about that. But this is only for killing things. And generally, this is only for killing things at a distance. If you find yourself in a situation where this rifle has to be used against another individual, you are out to kill that person. So if you're still in lawful society and you use this weapon on someone, you probably murdered them because it's got a scope. Shooting it at short range is impractical, if not impossible. So you got to be careful exactly what you're thinking when you get into this sort of weapon, because this is pure offense. The next type of firearms we're going to look at is the shotgun, specifically the 12 and the 20 gauge shotguns. A shotgun differs from a rifle in that it shoots multiple pellets of lead, all with one shot. They don't have the energy, they're not going to go as fast, and it's not going to be as accurate, but they pack a tremendous wallop. This is a lever action shotgun, patterned after the old 30-30s. A good classic rifle. Very clean, kicks a little bit, but you can enjoy it. This is a good bedside shotgun. There's a light attached to the shotgun. The trigger assembly is here on the pump for the light. You'll also see that there's a fiber optic sight attached to the top of the barrel. This is to gather more light so that you can still be as accurate as possible in low light conditions. And last of all, the 20 gauge shotgun. You figure about 30% reduction in gunpowder and about the same reduction in pellets. But again, the same fiber optic sight, front and rear. This one being a semi-automatic, every time you fire the weapon, it automatically loads another shell. You add the semi-automatic feature, which reduces the recoil, to a shotgun that uses less of a gunpowder charge and shoots fewer pellets. You've got something that's more comfortable for a smaller shooter, such as a female or a younger adult. This one is another good one to sit beside the bed. Next, we're getting into some of the more serious prepper firearms. I'm going to begin with the AK family of weapon platforms. Now, this is getting into a semi-automatic rifle that shoots a powerful cartridge at short and medium range. These are very serious. This is what the East Bloc used as their primary cartridge for many years. I'm going to start with your basic AK pattern rifle. They're very robust, very simple to operate, very difficult to damage. Their long-range capability is not tremendous, but their medium and short-range capabilities make them extremely deadly. Most of them will have a 30-round magazine, a common safety, and a very common bolt operation. You may notice that this sounds almost exactly like your 12-gauge pump. So the next time someone says, well, I'll just pump my shotgun and the bad guy will know exactly what it is and he'll run off. Nah, With any luck, he'll think you've got an AK instead. And while we're on that myth, don't pump your shotgun where somebody can hear it. All you're doing is giving away your position and letting them know you now have one less cartridge in the tube to use at them. But anyway, back to AKs. This is the rifle I would pick as a prepper if I was going to be out in the weather for days or weeks at a time. They are extremely resistant to rust, water, dirt, everything that messes up a rifle. These really don't care. Let's look at some of the other ones. The next rifle I want to look at in the AK family is the SKS. Often a little bit cheaper than an AK pattern rifle. It can still be modified with different stocks, different magazines. You might want to double check with the regulations of where you live, because you don't want to run afoul of the law just to get a different stock or whatever. It shoots the same cartridge and it shares that same robust dependability. But like I said, often a little bit cheaper than an AK pattern rifle. Still, a good rifle, solid, very dependable, and worth putting into your battery, especially if you want something that's not going to fail you in inclement weather or if it gets dropped in the mud or dirty. A nice one to have. The last AK rifle I want to show you is one that's been really modified. This is a combat AK designed for multiple problems. Like our shotgun, you'll see we've got an extremely bright light. This one's a little bit bigger than I would use, but once you get into firearms, you'll see that things get modified. You'll put stuff on, you'll take stuff off. This one is set up currently to deal with coyotes, and we've had bear sightings in the area recently. For black bear around here, this is my choice. Lots of opportunities to take up second or third shots, and something that's lethal enough to deal with a very large animal. This one you'll see is set up with a collapsible stock to make it easier to transport, easier for shorter statured people to use. For my money, I always go with a Midwest Industries scope mount. This attaches to the side of the rifle, and that's where you put your Aimpoint Pro. I'm going to talk about red dots here in a little bit, but for my money, I pick the one that you can leave on for 3 years at a time, and it doesn't fail you. AK-47, when you want something that absolutely will not let you down, regardless of the weather and how long you've been out in it, this is the one that I would choose for both an offensive and a defensive firearm. Now, immediately after the family of AK pattern rifles, you're going to hear people talk about other Russian firearms. Most notably, the Mosin Nagant. The Mosin Nagant fires a cartridge that's labeled the 7.62 by 54R. The R, people say, stands for Russian. It's correctly because it's a rimmed cartridge. This weapon shoots a cartridge that has been in use longer than any other cartridge in the world, and it's still in use today. This is a simple bolt-action rifle. It just holds a few rounds. It's not particularly fast to operate, but it's extremely accurate, especially for a iron sight rifle. Extremely rugged. The Russians used this all during World War I, and they still use the cartridge today in some of their sniper rifles. This weapon fires the exact same cartridge. It works exactly like an AK. The action is identical, but it only holds 10 rounds. Again, it's going to have optics on the side with a high power scope. This particular model is a Romanian PSL. You'll see a couple different versions of this. Some of them will shoot a German cartridge, but this is the most common configuration. When you see people talking about other Russian firearms, they're usually talking about one of these. This, by comparison, has the exact same ballistic chart for a 30-06. So if you're wondering about how strong is it, how does the bullet drop, how does it perform, this is the exact equivalent to an American 30-06. Next, we want to look at what you would call a tactical rifle or sniper rifle. This is a weapon platform that's not necessarily carried or moved around nearly as much It's meant to put in a static position. Perhaps someone on guard duty or overwatch, watching other people to make sure they stay safe. You're going to shoot just a very few rounds through it over the given amount of time, but they're going to be extraordinarily accurate. As you can see, the barrel is very, very thick. There's going to be very little whip. It's bolt action. The platform is extremely solid. You put this with a bipod and a high power scope, and a practice shooter can place extremely accurate shots over a very long distance. This is about as much gun as you're likely to need unless you're going out where it is extremely flat and you can see for just miles and miles. But this is not a terribly expensive rifle, and you can certainly hit exactly what you need to with this. Around here, the best example would be the aforementioned black bear if we were going to go looking for it and stop it. This is the one I would take if I was going to take on that sort of creature at a very long distance. Now let's talk about what is currently the favorite firearm of preppers all across North America, the AR platform rifle, also called the black rifle. They're popular because they're light, they're very reliable, the ammunition is light. The quality of this firearm has gone up dramatically over the last 20 years. You can buy accessories to make this thing do anything you want. First off, a detachable sling. A single point sling makes this rifle very easy to carry, manipulate, put down, pick up, and reattach. You'll notice there was one of these on the AK that we had just a few minutes ago. Any dedicated combat rifle, I seriously recommend you put a single point sling on it. Let's look at the basic characteristics of the AR platform rifle. They're extremely light. The recoil is almost non-existent. Reloading can be done in seconds. This magazine would hold 30 rounds, but you can buy them in many other configurations. The rifle itself is very easy to accessorize. If it's out there and for sale, you can find a spot to put it on this rifle, from lights to optics, different stocks that are fully adjustable, different grips. The rifle itself has two pins that hold it together. The top half can be removed and replaced with an entirely different configuration. Some of them can come with different calibers. Maybe you want one with a scope. Maybe you want one with a laser or night vision or thermal. Anything can be done with this rifle. That's why they're so very popular. You can get them in this 5.56 caliber, the 300 blackout we talked about earlier. Even a 308 AR-10 follows a very similar pattern to this rifle. Whatever your preference is in shooting, no matter how big you are, no matter how small you are, you can make this rifle fit your individual needs, which is why they are so tremendously popular. The last thing I want to talk about, and this is on this AR, but you've seen that we've had this same optic on a couple other rifles, is a red dot sight. There's no magnification here. It's just a red dot contained within the optic. It doesn't project it out onto my hand. It's not a laser. But what it is extremely durable. This is extremely foolproof. This is on this rifle because with a red dot sight, you have very, very fast target acquisition. If you've ever seen anybody at a competition with a red dot, they can pick up the target just one after the other, very quickly get on target. And in a combat rifle, that's exactly what you want. There's multiple settings for low light conditions all the way up to bright light conditions. The Aimpoint Pro is the one that I like personally. I've seen a lot of guys go out there, they show up at training day, they're going for the target, but then the red dot fails. The battery goes dead. The switch breaks. It won't stay zeroed. Problem after problem. Go with the one that's expensive. I know you can buy a red dot for $40. You can buy a red dot for $50. Forget it. Go with the one that costs you $300 or $400, and then you don't have to worry about it failing right when you need it the most. This one's battery powered, but you leave it on for 3 years at a time before the battery fails. If the battery does fail, by some strange, terrible happenstance, you can keep a spare one right here and you can keep on going. But if you're right in the middle of needing your rifle, we flip up the back sight. We use the front sight, the back sight, And as soon as we can get our red dot back in order, we're back in business. But in the meantime, we're not out in the cold. As you can see, this is a very simple platform, and the red dot, while it's on, is co-witnessed with the iron sights. It works really, really well, and it's really, really hard to tear up the system entirely and render your rifle completely inoperable. I know we've looked at a lot of different weapons platforms today, so I want to recap and emphasize the things that you want to put in your battery of firearms first. Now granted, these are tools, so like any other toolbox, the more you have, the more ways you have to respond to a problem. But we'll stick to just the basics. First, a quality handgun. It's with you all the time, and when you need it, this is most likely the tool that you're going to have at hand. 2, the shotgun. If something goes bang in the night, this is the one that I want by the bedside to respond to it. Note the quality lights, quality optics, name brands that I know are going to be dependable. Next, a battle rifle, whether it's the rugged AK platform or whether it's the lighter, more adaptable AR platform. Either of these are a good choice. You just want to make sure that you're dealing with quality accessories, good light, good red dot, good sling, quality magazines. And once you've got your rifle built, make sure it's zeroed properly and make sure you test it. When you need it is not the time to find out that you happen to get the bum flashlight or the sling that wasn't made properly. You want all this stuff tested month after month in very poor conditions to make sure that everything you've got comes out and works the way it's supposed to when you need it. If you're going to have a crisis, and it's going to be a crisis that requires a firearm, you absolutely have a serious situation that means this stuff has to work and you have to be able to trust it no matter what. Finally, on firearms, be careful because this can be the most expensive part of prepping. Don't get carried away. Don't succumb to impulse shopping. Decide what you need and how you're going to get it first. Don't put together a rifle with bits and pieces and hope that you come up with what you want when you're done. No, do it methodically. Be very careful. Also, make sure you do everything by the book. You want to be legal when you're purchasing firearms because the repercussions of doing something that's illegal can be quite severe. So do it right. Don't buy something that's been illegally modified. Don't illegally modify a gun. Use some common sense. Make sure you use the 4 rules of gun safety when you're operating your weapon. Always be sure of your target and its surroundings. Keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. Never point a rifle at something you do not intend to destroy, and every gun is always loaded, even if you've checked it yourself. Always obey those, even if you have a problem, a malfunction, an accidental discharge. If you're obeying the gun rules, you won't hurt somebody. You cannot afford to have an accident with a firearm no matter what you do. With that, be careful, be safe, be the ant, not the grasshopper. Next, I want to talk about other methods of security. Everything else you're going to do is going to fall into one of 2 categories, either active or passive security. Passive security would be something like hedgerows, fences, surveillance, motion detectors, things that you put up around your property, around your retreat, wherever your location is, that you don't actively have to do anything. You might look at a video camera, you might hear a motion sensor, but mostly it's the sort of stuff that isn't going to be used all the time unless someone tries to cross it or get through it. A good example would be if you are bugged out, you're in your location, and you really don't want someone approaching that location. A good passive result would come from maybe taking a dead animal, putting it way down at the end of the road. Someone walking down your street might have the choice which way to go. Well, there's a dead animal over there. I don't want to go that way. Even if they don't consciously think it, subconsciously, they're going to want to wander away from that dead animal. That would be good passive security. If you had good thorn row, hedges, blackberries, stuff that people just think, well, that's a much more difficult path than wandering this way. That's good passive security. Active security, dogs, other people, other sentries. If you've got some good, my favorite is Dobermans. They're very alert, always on the watch, never really totally asleep, always on yellow alert. That's a good dog. Other people in your group, you have to sleep sometime. You need someone else who's always awake. Better yet, several someones who are always awake. And better yet, several someones who are not anywhere close to where you're sleeping. They're a quarter mile this way, or they're way up on top of this ridge, so that anyone who could potentially be a threat, or at least an unknown, they are encountered at an extreme distance away from where the people that are trying to sleep, the people that are trying to be safe, are staying. Active security is something that really catches someone's attention and says, I don't want to mess with that. A good example of that would be a really good pack of guard dogs. There's several routes you can go. I prefer Doberman Pinschers. They shed very little. They're faster than a German Shepherd, and it is the only breed that was ever produced specifically to guard human beings. A German Shepherd is a nice second choice, but they shed a lot. If you live where it's really, really cold, you might not have an option because a Doberman has got really short hair. A German Shepherd is going to do better in that climate. But if you have no electricity, you will not be able to vacuum up after your German Shepherd. A German Shepherd sheds so much that scientists estimate that long before we all die from global warming, we will all be buried under 5 miles of hair from German Shepherd dogs. So keep that in mind with your preps. Other things you might want to do, take some good martial arts classes. Maybe you've got a knife, club, sword, whatever you want, but those are active defenses and they're your last ditch. So try and balance these out. Maybe have sentries quarter mile away from where you are trying to sleep, from where other people are trying to sleep, so that any threats or any unknowns are at least slowed down, questioned, sent away, or if you have to, eliminate them long before they can even see where you're sleeping. Let me give you some good examples of bad operational security and poor defenses. The smell of cooking bread, the smell of bacon, lights when it's dark, the things that from a long way away people are going to smell, they're going to see, and they're going to want to think, I haven't seen a light in days, but there's one. I've not had fresh bread in weeks, but I can smell it. I'm freezing cold, and I can smell a wood fire. Those are the kind of things you want to keep under control. Make sure you're aware of what sort of presence your community, your retreat is putting off. You want people to want to go away. You do not want people to come investigating when you don't really need them around. That are the other security considerations.
Hi, I'm Clayton Van Huss. I'm the producer for this video, and like you, I'm a prepper, and I have a few questions to ask Dale about his presentation. Question number 1, and you've heard this before, is doesn't prepping show a lack of faith in God to take care of me?
I get that question a lot. Do you know, and here's the question that answers the question, do you know that He is not taking care of you right now by giving you the training and the equipment that you will need later during a crisis? Will He take care of you? Sure. Should we question the form and the timing of that provision? I say that a lot of people don't realize when He's taking care of them in advance for something that's going to be happening in the future.
All right. Now, hand in hand with that, can you give us some biblical examples of prepping?
Nehemiah, Joseph, and Noah are the 3 big ones. Noah obviously had to prepare well in advance before it even started raining. Joseph had to prepare 7 years in advance of the crisis. And at the time, the people around them would have said, "What are you doing? Joseph, we've got all kinds of food. Why are you storing it? We've got a ton of it. Let's sell it and get rich." They could have. I'm sure they said that. They thought that. What are you're crazy. You're prepping like this. But he was providing well in advance of the crisis. Nehemiah, why you want to go back and build this city? Just leave it in ruin. Babylon's awesome. Let's just live there. Why you want to go back over there and mess around and busted up Jerusalem? Why would that be important? Yeah, he went and he did it anyway. He was preparing for something that had to be done hundreds of years later. How would the New Testament have panned out if Jerusalem was still a big rubble heap?
Yeah, and so prepping doesn't show a lack of faith. Rather, it shows an obedience to provide.
Right, and it leaves the timing in God's hands. It just gives us something to do to help do our part of whatever it is He calls us to do.
Great. Now, here's a big one for those of us in the Christian community. What are the moral implications for the Christian prepper when it comes to weapons and violence? I mean, shouldn't I just turn the other cheek if someone threatens me?
Turning the other cheek really relates more to an insult. Someone wants to denigrate you. Fine. You want to make fun of me? Fine. That is not an excuse for violence. But in North America, in the United States, we have a very clear understanding that God has given us a right to self-determination, self-defense. You don't get to kill someone just because you want to take their stuff, because you want to trample them down. You have a right to defend yourself, and you have a right to use lethal force to defend yourself, and that's moral. Violence is very, very seldom the answer. When it is the answer, it is the only answer. There's no substitute if you have to have violence to defend yourself.
Okay. Now, I heard that during Hurricane Katrina, the police went door to door and they confiscated firearms. Now, is this true? And if it is, what can I do if this happens to me?
Yes, it did happen. Yes, Congress acted after the fact. They made more laws to say that this is illegal, you can't do this, you can't take away people's right to defend themselves after a crisis. But you remember we talked about getting off the X. The best way to deal with this is to not be in those crosshairs. When I was in 3rd grade, I remember an elementary school teacher telling me how crazy it is that New Orleans even existed. When I was a little kid, I remember thinking, I guess I don't ever want to live there. They're below sea level. And someday they're going to have a problem. It happened. Now, this is a good example of a small location relative to the rest of the country.
Right.
Here in Tennessee, we didn't have a problem. I'm not sure that we even got rain off Katrina. Maybe we did, but we had no catastrophe. It was localized. Right there in Louisiana, the rest of the country watched it on TV and said, wow, that's terrible. That's a good example of if you looked ahead, if you looked at what could happen in that location, it has a very unique geographical problem of being below sea level. And you would think, well, someday, if the pumps quit working and we have a hurricane, the city's going to flood. Maybe I'll move. Look at your own location. Is there some problem? Is there something that common sense says, well, because of this and this, I could have a problem just because of where I live. And elsewhere in the country, well, things would be fine. During the war between the states, in this part of the country, specifically at the county seat in Blountville, how many battles were fought?
2.
2. And each battle lasted, what, a day?
If even.
Giving the setup, the armies march in, the armies leave. Figure maybe 5-6 days total. During that confrontation, during that war, if you lived in Blountville and you took 2 overnight trips and went camping and then came back home, you would have completely survived the Civil War. You would have heard about how awful it was. You would have seen the devastation in the newspaper and hearing it from relatives, but you yourself, you would have had to get off the X temporarily twice and survive that entire confrontation.
Certainly there would be some things that would reach you, such as, I don't know, maybe food shortages or, the loss of friends and loved ones. And again, going back to Katrina, I spent some time down there working immediately after the hurricane. I was actually down in Mississippi, and the destruction, the further inland you went, the less it was. But it was wide-reaching, but there were heavier spots and lighter spots.
So the point is, use common sense. Use your noggin. Figure out where are the problems most likely to be, where they're going to be the most severe, the longest lasting, and be somewhere else. You can't always figure it out perfectly.
Sure.
But you can figure out, well, I don't want to be here, and I really don't want to be here. So we're going to try over here.
Okay. All right. Now, here's a question that a lot of people might have. Why do I want to hide my preps and not advertise them to the public?
Okay. This gets back to our topic of the gray man. Mm-hmm. We talked about this in our last production. But simply put, it's being inconspicuous. You don't want to be the guy that's standing out in everybody's mind of, if there's a problem, I'll go take some of his stuff. That guy has some valuable equipment. I'm going to wait for him to go to work, and I'm going to break in and steal it. You want to be the person that is completely innocuous, inconspicuous, and doesn't stick out. That way you don't get robbed. You don't have to put up with situations that are completely avoidable. If your stuff is hidden, if it's out of sight, then it doesn't become a problem for no reason at all. These are things that you need during a crisis. These are not things that you want to get you tripped up long before there's any problems anywhere.
Okay. Now, that kind of leads to the next question. As a Christian, isn't it my duty to help anyone who comes along who needs my help?
Mm-hmm. We're helping them now. You can get help during a crisis. It's a lot easier to avoid the crisis. If everyone in the country decided that they were going to prepare for hard times, if everyone in the country picked up a 1930s, a 1920s mindset of thinking, well, tomorrow might not be so good, and I'm going to put back a little bit. Your grandparents did this, my grandparents did this. They had a little put back for hard times. They had food put back. They could get by on their own. And I realize that the country is much more urbanized than it was. But still, there is no excuse, Christian or otherwise, to just ignore everything that's going on in the world, throw all your excuses to the wind, and do nothing. Everyone can put back a little bit. And as Christians, why not preach it to a little bit more of an audience? Tell people, look, do a little bit more. Encourage people to do a little bit more, because if you can get them to help themselves now, it's not your responsibility later, because they're already taken care of, and you've taken care of them in advance. If they have to get to your door, that can become a much more difficult situation. It would be terrible to find yourself in that lifeboat situation. There's 8 people on the lifeboat. The lifeboat only holds 8 people. And then someone comes along and says, you gotta help me. Nobody wants to be in that lifeboat, in that situation, trying to decide, well, we've only got enough food to get by for another couple days, and here's another family that's hungry. Or there's only enough beds. Or these people are sick and I don't have the medicine to give them. Everyone that takes care of themselves ahead of time, everyone that takes care of themselves now to the best extent of their ability, you've really, really helped them.
Now, Dale, this particular topic of security, it brings up a lot of questions. There are a lot of hard questions to answer, kind of Wild West type scenarios. Should children be trained in the use of weapons, particularly firearms?
I think it's good that every adult understands and is capable of operating a firearm. When you begin that training really depends on what kind of kid do you have. Are they conscientious? Are they careful? Can they listen to and follow through with instructions? Are they mechanically inclined to where they can operate a firearm? My daughter started when she was 8 years old with a single shot, break action, 22 long rifle, very simple, and I was right here. And I could make sure everything happened very slowly, very carefully. Several years have gone by. She's capable of operating a 9mm carbine now, semi-automatic. It's just, she can barely lift it up and it's not too heavy. But some kids, they don't listen and they're not careful and they're rambunctious. And you don't want to start them out until they have the maturity to listen and be safe. You cannot afford an accident with a firearm and a minor. That is one of the worst case scenarios. So parents, know your kid. Put them with what they can use, when they can use it. If there's adults that I wouldn't trust them with a spoon, much less firearm. So it's going to vary from person to person. Sure, you want people to have the training, you want people to have the skills, you want your kids to know how to make a fire, set up a campsite, sure, use a firearm, do all the different things that 100 years ago were completely ordinary things for a kid to know how to do. But you have to make sure that it syncs up with their level of maturity, their physical ability, and in a way that's going to be safe.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, here's another hard question. Why would unprepared people pose a threat? I mean, aren't people inherently good, and you know, the breakdown of society isn't going to be as extreme as people are worried about?
People, no, they are not inherently good. People are inherently monstrous, and it's just that thin veneer of civilization that keeps things operating smoothly. You have a crisis, things really go all to pieces. Several years ago, we had the earthquake in Haiti. 9 meals went by before the news started reporting about the machete gangs. 9 meals. That's how quickly that veneer of that civilization vanished. Never ever underestimate the stupidity of people in large groups. They might not be armed. They might. But 100 people with clubs, or 100 people with some gasoline and a rag and some bottles that want to set your house on fire, that's really, really tough to deal with. The unprepared people can cause problems in all sorts of ways. Even if they're just being incompetent and leaving half-eaten dead animals upstream from your property a week ago that you don't know about. And now you've got rotting debris in your drinking water. See, there's all kind of ways that a problem in society filters to you, either directly or indirectly.
Okay, and I know that when it comes to ourselves, we do tend to get desperate when we're in trouble, but when our children are starving, that's a whole different ballgame right there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you cannot underestimate people's drive to live and provide for their families. If you have a without rule of law civilization, even temporarily, it can be extremely dangerous for everyone. This is why it's so important to have groups of people that can watch each other's back. You have to sleep. Your wife has to sleep. Your kids have to sleep. Not everyone can be up all the time, standing guard all day long. You need other people to help you.
Okay. Now, let's say that I'm new to the realm of firearms. I know nothing about guns. Where can I learn?
I would start at your local independent gun store, because every trainer, everyone who's trying to make a living in the firearms industry is going to try network. And they're going to have business cards. If you want to take a handgun carry class, if you want to take an armed guard class, if you want to take a security class or a tactical class, those people are looking for you because they want your business. Go to the places where they're going to advertise, which is going to be your gun show, your gun store, the little independent guys. Sometimes you'll find things like that advertised in social media. If you're seeing it in a magazine, it's probably more for a professional level class. But the people are out there, just like when you're looking for a group, go where it makes sense that those people would advertise.
Okay. So you mentioned a couple of different types of classes people could take. What's the difference in, say, a tactical class and a security class?
Well, when I mean security class, say you want to be an armed guard.
Right.
You want to drive an armored car or whatever. That usually requires, depending on what state you're in, a different type of license, different qualifications, very specific parameters. Whereas a tactical class, there are a lot of them out there, Gunsight or TAC2, places where anyone can go and you will receive a professional level of training on a specific weapon or how to act and behave and respond to a dangerous situation. Sometimes you'll have a policeman there with you taking the class, or SWAT teams. Sometimes it's other just ordinary day-to-day people. It's usually run by former military special operators, people like that, so that they really try and teach you this is how this weapon platform operates in this stressful situation to get you to drive your weapon in such a way that's going to be effective.
So there are serious classes that can be taken by a common person.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you can get a subscription or group rates, or you can go with a friend, or you'll sign up and you'll take a class, once every couple of months on different topics. We were at one just a couple of months ago, and it was at a gun training location, but it was a first aid class. There were no guns, and we didn't need hearing protection. It was a classroom, and we learned different ways to deal with very nasty problems. But it was really, really worthwhile. You can find these things and get that training. It is out there.
Well, that's great. Now, if I can only afford to get one firearm for whatever the crisis might be, what should I get?
I'm glad you're asking the easy questions. The best answer is get the one you're going to practice with. Get the one that fits your body ergonomically. There are really, really powerful firearms out there that I would not want to carry up a set of stairs. There are really, really light, cheap firearms that I would not trust to use in defense against a Chihuahua. So find what works for you. And again, when you go to train, when you go to your independent dealer, get them to help you. Say, well, let me see that one. Is it too heavy? Is it too light? Does it fit my body properly? Could I picture myself having to carry this thing all day? Would I want to train with it all day? How expensive is the ammunition for this gun? You might get something that looks great, and then you find out, oh, it's $1.50 a round. You can't train with it at all. You'll go broke. Oh, well, this one's really cheap, and that the ammunition's inexpensive, so okay, I'll give this one a shot. Find out what's going to work for you first. There is no, this gun is perfect for everybody. Mm-hmm. So there's your answer.
Okay, so guns are like tools or vehicles in that they perform different tasks depending on what type of gun it is. A shotgun, say, and a battle rifle are two different things.
Yeah, when we get into our vehicle production, you're going to ask the same question. What's the best bug-out vehicle? And I'm going to give you the same kind of answer. You can imagine, there is no one-size-fits-all.
Yeah. Okay, great. Now, I see a lot of videos and blogs on the internet, and there are people who argue the benefits and drawbacks of the AK-47 versus the AR-15 platforms. I mean, and this is almost as bad as arguing politics and religion. People get heated and angry and all that sort of thing. In whose opinion should I place my trust? I mean, where do you stand on this debate?
You're asking me which is better, the AK-47 or the AR-15 platform?
Or is one better?
This really, really is a question very similar to, do you prefer Coke or Pepsi, Ford or Chevy? Firearms have evolved now for hundreds of years. The level of quality is so high compared to what we used to have 100 years ago. The level of performance that you can get out of either one is so worthwhile that there's not really a good answer. I'll give you the quick rundown, and I think we talked about this a little bit before. The AK is a little heavier. It is more rugged. If I knew I was going to have to carry my rifle from here to the state capitol, defend my country against some foreign invader, and spend the next 2 years outdoors, I would rather have the AK. If I knew that this was a gun that I was going to clear a building with, and at the end of the day I was going to be back at a base cleaning my weapon and getting everything back exactly the way I wanted, maybe reconfiguring a light or something, and I was going to have to carry a lot of ammunition, I would prefer the AR platform. Both are really, really good. Both will get the job done. Both are extremely lethal. But I like both of them. I train with both of them. I practice with both of them consistently, as well as a 12 gauge, as well as a handgun. I want to make sure that whatever platform I happen to have, I can run that gun. I can drive the gun and make it perform as good as it can. The weak link in that question is always going to be the shooter.
Okay.
A really, really good marksman can make either of those platforms perform very, very strongly.
Right. I know you hear a lot of arguments about, well, the AR is so much more accurate, and but like you just said, I've seen people take an AK-47 and hit something at a distance consistently, and they just know what they're doing.
There's a really, really interesting book. It's called The Gun.
Mm-hmm.
It's the history of not just the AK-47, but a lot of other military firearms. Read it. It's very interesting, and it answers a lot of those kind of questions. It's an interesting historical perspective. A lot of the stories of an AK-47 being very inaccurate came from people who got them in war. And they would come across an AK that had shot thousands and thousands of rounds. You could take the bullet and literally drop it through the barrel, and it would just fall out the other end. The barrel was so shot out. And so the American soldiers would get it, and they'd try it, and they'd think, well, this thing's junk. It won't hit anything. You take any firearm and put thousands and thousands of rounds through it, and it ruins it, and it won't be accurate. That contributed a lot. Earlier there were, and I mean several decades ago, AKs that were imported into this country, and some of them were poor quality, and that added more to people's stipulations of, well, it just doesn't hit anything. Well, right now, with a modern AR-15 or a modern production AK that's built to quality standards, they are both going to be extremely accurate. And there are AKs that are now made brand new in North America. The quality is tremendous. The durability is still tremendous. ARs are made all over the place in North America. The quality is tremendous. So you're really getting into the very fine detail of, well, which brand new truck should I really buy? Compared to, you take a brand new truck and compare it to a truck that's 30 years old, that the guy's been chopping down trees and hauling lumber home with every week, you're not going to think that they're anywhere close. You're talking new versus new, and the difference is tiny.
Okay, great. So a lot of personal preference and a lot of specific for the job type stuff there. Mm-hmm. Okay, now you mentioned dogs, of course, in this video, specifically Dobermans and German Shepherds. Mm-hmm. What should I consider when selecting a dog?
Another big topic. I prefer the Doberman Pinscher. It is the breed that was made specifically to protect human beings. And that's what Pinscher made them for, or Doberman made them for, the Pinscher dogs. A German Shepherd is a good dog. The German Shepherd produces a huge amount of hair. They shed constantly. If you're in some place where it's cold and the dog might have to be outside more, you might want to think about a German Shepherd. If the dog is going to have to live inside with you and you had to vacuum every single day just to keep the dog hair under control, a grid down situation could be very, very difficult. The other breed that I would also have people consider would be the American Bulldog. They were in the South. They nearly went extinct during the last World War because everyone that was raising them went to go fight the Germans. And when they came back home, there was just a few dogs left that could still even have puppies. The breed has come back from extinction. They look like a little English Bulldog, but huge. The temperament is much more protective, and they make a great guard dog. So you might think about those. A Doberman Pinscher has got a great guard mentality. They're extremely intelligent, and they're really, really fast. You cannot outrun a Doberman at all. They don't shed very much. There are different bloodlines. You want to be very careful. I would prefer a European Doberman if I wanted one for security, any working dog. An American Doberman Pinscher is usually more graceful. They're prettier. They have a lighter bone structure. They're usually a little bit lighter. A European Doberman has been bred more as a working breed. They'll be a little bit denser, a little bit heavier. They're not as pretty, but they have been selected more in terms of physical working ability and mentality for being a protection dog, where the American Doberman has been bred in the direction of a pet. Now, you'll find good and bad examples of both. These are very general concepts. So any of those three breeds, the German Shepherd, the American Bulldog, the Doberman Pinscher, all of them are really, really great.
There's a lot to think about. So let's say that I get a dog. Where can I get my dog trained to protect my family and watch out for us in time of crisis?
This is going to be something that you will not see very common at all. Dog training is a very specialized industry. It is extremely expensive, something that you will probably have to look a long time to find a quality trainer, and you're going to have to spend a lot of money to get it done. There are a few around. There are Shih Tzu clubs and competitions where people get together and they bring their dogs, and they will have different tracking, different obedience tests. It's a very specialized sort of contest. That's where I would begin. Look for one in your area and go from there and find out, okay, do you train your dog? Do you have somebody else train your dog? But you're going to want to start with one of those breeds that is predisposed to learning that sort of thing. It would be very difficult to train, certain breeds, like the English Bulldog. They are content to just be there. They're not aggressive, they're not mean, they want to be everybody's buddy. So start with a dog that's going to do what you want, not one that you really have to work and make it behave in a way that's outside of its general nature. You wouldn't train a cat to guard your house. Certain dogs work better. Certain dogs, a husky dog, they've got their job. Protection is not as much. A bloodhound is a great tracking dog. It is a terrible guard dog. So think about what breed you're getting, what do you want out of your dog, and go from there.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about using dogs for security. What should I do about caring for my dog during a crisis? Is there anything special I need to do for a dog that I didn't prep for a human?
Well, with any animal, preventative maintenance is a big deal. You want to make sure that your dog is up to speed on like the rabies shots. You've got plenty of heartworm medication to keep them from getting other parasites. You want to make sure they've got plenty of dry dog food that's stored. Keep it dry, keep the rodents out. You don't want mice getting into your dog food supply, just like you wouldn't want to get any rodents into your food supply. So keep that healthy. Keep your dog up to speed. If they have problems while you still have a functioning society, make sure that animal's really, really well taken care of. This is a member of your family. You rely on them to help protect you, so make sure that you are protecting them.
Okay, that makes sense. So now you mentioned earlier in some of our passive defenses, hedges and thorns as natural deterrents against trespassers. Mm-hmm. Now, don't those take up a lot of valuable space that could be used for other things such as growing crops?
Maybe if you live in some suburban McMansion hell, ideally you're going to have the room to grow everything you need with a space, and then put your protective barriers way out along the edges, but you can have some that actually produce food. Blackberries, prickly pear. There's a lot of things that you can put out there that are going to give you some sort of useful resource, in addition to being a little bit of a barricade, something that people don't want to walk through, or maybe form a barrier that they're not going to see in to your property if you want to keep them kind of at arm's length.
It's a great idea, having something dual purpose instead of just it's there for one thing and one thing only. Okay, now here's a thought for those who live in an urban setting. A lot of people figure, well, I'm close to emergency help, such as the police. Shouldn't I trust that they're going to patrol my streets and keep everything safe in the event of some sort of horrible crisis?
Help is not coming. You are your own first responder. If there is a crisis and things have really, really fallen apart, is the police officer going to go in and clock in, or is he going to stay home and take care of his family? He might do either one. He might have access to a dispatcher. You might have access to 911. If any of that falls apart in our infrastructure, the policeman may not be there. He may not be able to even know that you're having a problem, and you may not be able to even call for help. This is a multi-layer piece of infrastructure that very quickly can fall apart, leaving you helpless. So the person who's going to look after you the most is you. No one's going to look after your family more than you are. If the cops can get there and help, great. But we're talking about a situation where they might not be able to get there, know about a problem. No, I would not count on them at all. Not because they're bad guys, but because they just might not logistically be able to do anything to help you.
Okay. Now, the reverse side of that coin, if I live in a rural setting, I might feel isolated. Would I not be more at the mercy of roving gangs of thugs out there?
You could. This is where you get into the law of the inverse square. The further away you get from a population density, the less people there are that can cause you problems. Whether they're bad guys, people who can't help themselves, anything that's going on, if the majority of the population in your little corner of the world is you, your family, your group, then the problems that can arise are very, very small. If you are so far out in the American Redoubt and you're living in Idaho, you're living in Wyoming, someplace where the roving gang is going to be 3 guys, compared to if you're living in Southern California, where the roving gang is going to outnumber the police department of a major city, that's when you've got a problem. So reduce the population and you reduce a lot of the problems that come from people.
I guess that just makes common sense. Okay, now you've mentioned offensive weapons and defensive weapons. Aren't all guns made to kill and therefore offensive?
Okay, you're talking about when we were looking at bolt-action rifles.
Right.
Okay, let's start with defensive. A handgun, small, portable, very short range compared to other firearms. It is there if you have an immediate crisis and you have to respond very quickly. You've got it right there at your side. You can use it to defend yourself against whatever the crisis is. A shotgun is going to have a little bit more range, but again, if you are in combat, you probably didn't take a shotgun. Soldiers, they sometimes will use a shotgun, but not very often. On the opposite side, if you're using a bolt-action rifle, the minimum effective range is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to 100 yards. You've got a powerful scope, you've zoomed in very closely. But that gun comes into its own at 200 yards, 300 yards, 400 yards. At that distance, it is hard to imagine a scenario where the person that you would be defending yourself against is a legitimate threat. Someone that's 400 yards away, can you legitimately say that this person is a threat to my person? This person is a threat to my family? If they're using some sort of tactical rifle, if they have a precision firearm and they're exchanging fire with you, enemy at the gates sort of thing, you're dueling snipers. Okay, fine, you want a bolt-action rifle for that one particular scenario. But for the most part, a person that's 400 yards away is not a threat. Maybe in some very limited scenarios, but for the most part, that is an offensive weapon. If you were in a military situation and you're carrying the bolt-action rifle, then you are probably looking for very specific targets to eliminate at a long range and very specific rules of engagement. So that's where we make the distinction. If you or I are carrying around a bolt-action rifle and those bullets are intended for people, then that is something where you wonder what kind of scenario are they involved in really. They have their place, it's great for a hunting rifle, and if you're providing overwatch for your group and you're defending a small community and you know that there are people that are dangerous, then maybe you are providing very long-range cover fire. Maybe you're acting as, an archangel position. But that scenario is very, very limited. When you look at more of the AR-15, the AK-47, that is a good medium range and close range, somewhat long range, but not really compared to the bolt action. The minimum effective range of an AK-47 is about this far. You can still use it at very close range. You can still use it at medium range. It's the same thing for the AR-15. But when you get into a dedicated scoped rifle that is very much an offensive weapon, it has very little defensive capabilities, and the short range ability of a scoped rifle is very, very minimal compared to other types of firearms that are genuinely for defensive short range purposes.
So a scoped precision rifle would be for initiating something. I know one person who has a garden that is overlooked by a large ridge line, and there are some maybe undesirables who live on the other side of that ridge, and he's worried that maybe he's out working in the garden during hard times and they're sitting up there with their own hunting rifle, waiting for someone to come out in the garden.
If you're talking about shooting people back and forth at extreme ranges of hundreds of yards, you're talking about a very, very extreme, very serious, without rule of law, life and death, Wild West situation that's probably outside the scope of most of this discussion of preppers and survivalism, but it helps to categorize what could you have that rifle for, why would you have it versus another tool. So we're trying to look at the definition of what that tool would be for.
Okay.
Most people with a bolt-action scoped rifle are using it to defend themselves against animals. A deer that's going to be a big danger to your garden, a bear that's going to be a big danger to your livestock, things like that. A coyote is a huge threat to your goats or your sheep. That is a great application for a bolt-action scoped rifle that you can eliminate those sorts of threat at longer ranges. When you talk about dealing with people with that kind of a weapon system, that's when you're really getting into a little bit of a scary place.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. I have one more question for you, and it deals with something you'd mentioned earlier. You said that the 7.62 by 5.4 rimmed cartridge, the Russian cartridge, is the cartridge in longest use. Now, I know that there are other bullets that go like with Old West type guns and that sort of thing that you can still buy. Could you clarify what you meant by that?
The 7.62 by 54 R cartridge. It's a Russian cartridge. It was first used in 1891. It is still used today in that part of the world. There is no other cartridge that is still used today that has that long of a history, with several different weapons platforms that all use this. And like I said, ballistically, it is very similar to a .308 or a .30-06. Depending on the exact gunpowder load, the exact bullet you're using, they're going to all float around the numbers a little bit differently with each other. But in terms of practical application, it's the same sort of cartridge as what you would get in an American .30-06 or a .308 Winchester round.
At a much lower price.
A much lower price. The biggest downside of that particular round is that most of the ammunition is surplus, and they have a primer that uses a corrosive chemical inside. So when the cartridge goes off, you're left with this salt that's slowly eating away at your rifle. So if you buy one of these, when you clean your rifle, give it another couple days and clean your rifle again. Because if you shoot that ammunition that's corrosive and then just let your gun sit for a while, you'll get a lot of surface rust, particularly the PSL we had with the rattlesnake skin. The gas tube, where the piston moves, that very quickly begins to show surface rust. So you have to make sure that that sort of ammunition is cleaned really well out of the gun because of the residue that it leaves behind.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dale. Thank you for answering our questions. Well, that wraps up our question and answer session here on the security video. If you have further questions, feel free to check out our website and our social media pages.
Look forward to our future productions on other topics related to prepping, homesteading, prepper groups, and bug-out vehicles are coming soon.
Thank you so much for watching the video, and remember that God has not